NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh has now read the full report that alleges MPs aided foreign actors meddling in Canada's democracy. His main takeaway? Singh says there have been MPs who've acted in unethical and traitorous ways.
The report indicated that I was a target. After having read the report, I am more convinced than ever of the conclusions of the NCCOP committee and the report that some parliamentarians are, in the words of the intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. That all of these behaviors of these MPs are deeply unethical and contrary to the oaths and affirmations parliamentarians take to conduct themselves in the best interests of Canada. In short, there are a number of MPs who have knowingly provided help to foreign governments, some to the detriment of Canada and Canadians. There are also politicians at all levels of government who have benefited from foreign interference. Some of this behavior absolutely appears to be criminal and should be prosecuted. If there continues to be no consequences for MPs who knowingly help foreign governments act against Canadian interests, we will continue to be an easy target. And it really does highlight to me the failure of leadership of both Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. Deeply concerning failures of leadership. Like, I don't understand, after having read that report, why Justin Trudeau didn't act sooner and continues to show inaction, and why Pierre Poilievre, as I am, a prospective candidate to become Prime Minister of this country, why he expects that people should have trust in him when he doesn't want to know about very disturbing allegations directly connected to his party that India, among other countries, were involved in foreign interference in leadership races. The fact that he doesn't want to know and has been silent, I believe, very firmly disqualifies him as a prospective leader of this country.
Okay, all of this leaves Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, as Jagmeet Singh was saying, as the only National Party leader not seeking the security clearance to read this full report. Conservative MP Michael Chong says there's no point to leaders being briefed on information they can't share.
The leader would not be able to divulge this information to anyone else, and therefore would not be able to act on this information. At the end of the day, if members of the House of Commons are knowingly and wittingly assisting foreign states to the detriment of Canada's national interests, to the detriment of the people of Canada, then those individuals need to be held accountable. That's not up for party leaders to decide. Expulsion, if the offences are so grave that they require expulsion from the House of Commons, that requires a vote of the House of Commons.
All right, we're going to talk about all of this with the Power Panel. Le Devoir columnist Emily Nicolas is here. Carleen Bryan is a former Chief of Staff to Liberal Cabinet Ministers. Gary Keller is a former Chief of Staff to Conservative Cabinet Ministers. And Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP Cabinet Minister. Gang, it's good to see you. Happy Thursday. Carleen, I would like to start with you. The bit of tape we showed there on Jagmeet Singh was the non-chaotic part of the press availability he had today, because it got very confusing very quickly, and it left the impression he was saying current MPs are traitors. And I've clarified with his office that that is not what he was saying, one way or another. He wasn't broadening our understanding beyond what's in the NSI COP report. But as I was just saying to Melanie Joly, Carleen, this is not the way to do national security, it seems. This has gotten quite chaotic over the past week.
We just blew right past due process, didn't we? I mean, one of the first tenets of security and intelligence information is that there is a distinct difference between intelligence and evidence. What the party leaders have been briefed on and what the NSI COP committee has been briefed on are pieces of intelligence that have been gathered by Canada and by its allies with whom we have information sharing agreements. What we saw from Jagmeet Singh there was sort of a jump right to there is evidence that suggests criminal activity has been taken. He said, I'm convinced that these parliamentarians have been willing participants. He stated that he believed that those behaviors ought to be prosecuted. My hope is that this was sort of a moment of being overzealous, because I'm sure that Jagmeet Singh, like most people, agrees with and understands the fact that in a democracy like Canada, elected officials do not direct law enforcement to arrest or lay charges against or prosecute people, and there's a very good reason for that. I think a generous interpretation would be to say that this was very personal for him because, as he mentioned, he learned that he had been a target in this. But I think he sort of blew past what many would consider reasonable today.
Well, I don't know if he blew past reasonable or not, Gary, but I find my issue is I'm getting more confused. The more politicians read in and the more they say in a partial and incomplete thing, slipping back and forth between tenses and in the chaos of a media scrum. Like, let's face it, it was chaotic when he was taking questions. I just wonder what you think of like where we are in our understanding. Like foreign interference, a big thing, very clear, lots of evidence in that, but in terms of who the politicians are, how active they are, how present they are, how recent they are, I'm less clear now.
Yeah, and we've had now yesterday's press conference with Elizabeth May, where she said she had, quote unquote, no worries about people in the House of Commons. We have Jagmeet Singh now coming out and saying he's deeply concerned. He's saying he saw what he considered to be illegal activity that should be prosecuted. You know, when you read the unredacted version of the NSICOP report, it talks about maybe illegal, not illegal, maybe illegal, and could potentially be an offense, but the offenses are not clear. We had Melanie Joly just a few minutes ago on your show, David, say that she believes that the House of Commons is, quote unquote, pristine.
Yeah.
So there's
pristine was my word. Pristine was my word, just to be clear.
Your word? I thought she had repeated pristine.
Yeah.
In any case, there are sort of three different readings there in three different interviews, and this is the challenge when you have political actors weighing in on this, on this public information. And I think at the end of the day, it was a responsible approach for the House of Commons to vote for Madam Justice Ugg and her commission. She's a judge. She has the proper clearances. She has proper protocols in place to protect certain pieces of information and intelligence, to take a look at this and to actually weigh on this, because we're not going to get clarity from political actors. I don't think in some cases, I don't think it is being active. I think, like you say, in the heat and the battle of political discussions, you're going to have different interpretations, different explanations, and it's just adding to the confusion. Yeah. And everybody just wants to know, are there current sitting both members of the House of Commons or senators who fit that category of witting or semi-witting participants in foreign interference? And today, like you, I still feel unclear about that.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't know where you are on this. It seems to me there's probably not, beyond the lingering question of Han Dong, because of Don Valley North, based on what Elizabeth May said, and she was not outright contradicted in the clarification from Singh's office. But just what's your thoughts on where we are now?
Yeah, so this isn't the best way to do it. I mean, obviously it should go over through some other process, but it worries me that the Liberals continue to hide behind this fig leaf of a difference between what is intelligence and what is evidence. We're not necessarily saying there has to be criminal activity for a member of Parliament to have disqualified themselves from serving in the Parliament. If they are witting participants of foreign interference, clearly they should be called to account for that. And I just can't understand how it's so hard for at least two of the parties to be able to come forward and say that, and to be able to deal with that either on their own or through some other process. I am glad the House of Commons has voted unanimously on Bill 70. I am glad that they're moving in the majority to move over to the Oak Commission this, and it needs to be looked at. But this idea, again, that somehow there's nothing to see here, despite the fact everyone believing there's something to see here, is where the Liberals are hanging their hat on this.
Yeah, Andrew, just to follow up on that, I get the sense the Liberals and the Conservatives are willing to chuck people who are witting if it can be proven they're witting. I think in the Conservatives' case, they don't know because they haven't read in. And in the Liberals' case, they seem to be not sure because of all the vagary around intelligence. How do you see that?
Well, again, this can be cleared up by, providing a bit more transparency into what has actually been said. Maybe these aren't major offenses. I said that last week.
Right.
I mean, it's possible that these aren't, that these are, transgressions, who knows? And until we actually see what is there, until they've had a chance, I think as Singh said today, the MPs themselves should be made aware of the allegations against them. Yes, put some due process in place. But at the end of the day, not everything, contrary to what the Liberals think, needs to go to a court. Some of that should be decided by the electorate.
Emily, what's your sense on this? It's been a weird week in Ottawa. What's your view of it?
Yeah. If I was a journalist on the Hill or having access directly to MPs, the one question I would be asking is, what's your understanding of the difference between foreign interference and diplomacy? That line seems to have been lost in the plot. And I think that's why you have people reading the report saying there's nothing to see here, and people reading the report saying this is outrageous and everybody should be prosecuted. I think because we're not, when we're talking about, foreign actors interfering in our politics, what gets messed up here is the difference between having foreign actors interference in our electoral processes, countries trying to support, campaign for a candidate or deter the campaign of a different candidate, would it be in general elections or within political party leadership races. And that seems to be what has really upset Jagmeet Singh and what he might have been a target of. And then there's the issue that's been completely put together in the report of people discussing policies with diplomats from countries that we have decided are bad actors.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very different issue. And that is the issue in which there seems to be allegations of a whole bunch of MPs engaging in that. And that is exactly the same kind of thing that François-Philippe Champagne, for example, when he's advertising that he's going to the United States, talking to elected officials over there, trying to defend Canadian interests there. If we are using the same lens that we have been talking about here in Canada about foreign interference, we could be saying that the Canadian government is doing foreign interference in the American election. We're not doing that because we know the difference between trying to influence policy and having policy conversations with MPs and trying to mess with electoral processes. And the way that this report has been drafted is that it's not making that difference. And there is things that are bundled together that should not be bundled together. And there's questions, there's things that are being framed as foreign interference because it's coming from countries that are framed as bad actors, and that other countries are doing exactly the same thing, and we're doing exactly the same thing with other countries, and that's just framed as diplomacy. And there's no clear line there. There's very little rule to define the kind of lobbying that MPs are able to get from diplomats that Canada has not cut ties with, but is being in an awkward situation with. And that is to me, the gray area of messiness that allows everybody's feelings to get really, really high and people to have a lot of questions and have very little answers.
Right, but there is a whole issue of overt and covert. When Minister Champagne goes to the United States, that is a media blitz, right? He's going there to reinforce the relationship, not saying vote Democrat over Republican. At least that's how we understand it.
Exactly.
The covert stuff,
the difference, yes.
The covert stuff is the challenge. And Gary, so this goes back to Mélanie Joly said it, Jagmeet Singh said it. Pierre Poilievre is not afraid to go against the tide in this parliament. I think that's easy to say, but there is this question of why he won't read it. He says his hands would be tied because he can't act on it with MPs. But there's allegations of interference in leadership races involving the one he won, nominations. These are things you can deal with as a party leader without being constrained by the Reform Act. What's the justification in not wanting to know if the issue is so serious they had to get rid of David Johnston and demand a public inquiry?
Well, I take both the leader and Michael Chong at their words when they say they strongly believe that they're not going to be able to raise the issues and prosecute the case, how the government is handling foreign interference in the House of Commons, both inside and outside the House of Commons.
But that's a political concern rather than a national security concern, right?
The question is that a politically tenable position going on at the same time when you have all these different readings into it, and I don't know if that will be a politically tenable position in the long run. I mean, I think that is ultimately the big question here. As for the unredacted version of the NCICOP report does discuss accusations of interference in leadership races, plural, by both India and the People's Republic of China. I think there's no reason why Justice Ho couldn't look at that. I mean, she has looked at nomination races involving Han Dong and Don Valley West and the Liberal Party. I don't see why there would be any.
Don Valley North. We don't want to implicate an innocent
Don
riding
Valley
here.
North.
Don Valley North.
They keep changing the Don Valleys. I think for me the question is is it politically tenable? Because at the end of the day, political leaders are responsible for signing nomination papers. And I take Mr. Poilievre at his word when he says he strongly believes he won't be able to prosecute the case inside or outside the House of Commons. That's a position that's backed up by Tom Mulcair earlier today on another network.
Right. Okay. But Tom Mulcair supports Pierre Poilievre. But Karleen, should the motivation of a parliamentarian who is the frontrunner to be prime minister be that I can't prosecute it politically, rather than I can solve this as a leader and as a parliamentarian?
Absolutely not. It's about leadership. To be the only political party leader that is deciding, I can't do it exactly the way I would like, therefore I'm refusing to participate at all. It's shirking your responsibility as a parliamentarian, but beyond that, you're the leader of a political party whose leadership race is named in this report as having been subject to interference. The mental gymnastics that you have to do to get to a place of saying, well, it doesn't make sense for me to learn more about that as the leader of that organization. It's staggering. I actually think, and I really want to give credit to Poilievre's team. I think they're an extremely strong political team. They're some of the smartest political strategists in Canada right now. But I think we might be witnessing the first really true strategic error of his team in this hard-nosed refusal to get briefed, because we are weeks into this. You could actually say we're a year into this larger foreign interference story at this point. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Pierre Poilievre and his refusal to get briefed. It's an increasingly untenable position. I don't see it lasting.
Andrew, how do you see that
the
one?
number one job of the leader of the opposition is hold the government to account. And Mr. Singh
we
earlier
just saw
today,
Jagmeet Singh hold the government to account after having been briefed, didn't we?
And you know what he said when he was asked point blank, will you take this government down and will you vote against this government? He's going to have a chance to do that tonight.
That's not the only measure of holding a government to account, Gary.
The government later
he
today.
just held them to account in a press conference by highlighting failures.
Right. Okay.
And he was asked point blank, are you going to support the government? And he muffled his way out of it.
Well, I mean, he has commented in the past on the wisdom of bringing down a government until you've dealt with the issue of foreign interference, having an election, until we know how we're going to actually have safeguards. But Andrew and Emily, I want to get your quick thoughts on this. Should Mr. Poilievre get briefed in? Andrew, your thoughts?
Well, sure, of course he should. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where a political leader wouldn't want to know what allegations are being made, especially within their own party. I mean, I think when we listened to Elizabeth May yesterday, we were all a little bit relieved, although nobody asked her directly whether she had been targeted or whether she had been, her party had been named, but the assumption was no. Today, Singh says, yes, he was targeted, ostensibly, one would assume, by India. And that he's concerned about this, and he's concerned about who else is under pressure in the parliament. For a party leader not, I find the other two positions tough. You've got the Liberal Party leader who's read the report but doesn't seem to be doing anything about it, and a Conservative Party leader that's refusing to read the report and also isn't doing anything about it. I don't know how either of those positions really hold.
Emily, quick last word to you, and we got to take a break.
We just need to remember that it was Pierre Poilievre starting this whole fire in the first place last year, because yes, it has been over a year now since this story is going on, foreign interference, and a lot of that was efforts targeting the Trudeau government, but even looking at this non-story, in hindsight, that was also the Trudeau Foundation, and trying to really make the Liberal Party look as a bunch of corrupt people who are in bed with China and all of that. And now that it is coming back to him, and what about you? What have you been? Have you been the target of that? His tactics is changing, and the only way I think he might think of getting away with this is because people have a very short-term memory in politics. But if you do take the year-long run of how this whole thing started, Pierre Poilievre refusing to look at the report now isn't looking good. And I think if people are given that long view, they will agree that it really doesn't look good for Pierre Poilievre.